"Damn, the scary queen has a nice butt," Private Ryan Cooper muttered to himself, not realizing the statue behind him was the cloaked Valorian queen herself. Ryan leaned back against the cold metal wall of the Summit Hall entrance, his eyes scanning over the familiar promotional holograms scattered around. Each one showcased an alien leader from across galaxies, attending what was supposed to be a monumental diplomatic meeting on Earth. But today, it was all quiet. He let out a soft sigh and crossed his arms tightly against the chill creeping up through the floor tiles. The air conditioning was set way too low for him. It always felt like standing outside in an Antarctic blizzard whenever he had guard duty here. And it wasn't just cold boredom cut deeper than any weather could. "Man, I'd kill for some action around here," Ryan grumbled under his breath as his gaze landed on a hologram of Queen Valara the Stern, a purple-skinned warrior queen known more for her imposing death glares than friendly smiles. She was practically synonymous with sternness and intimidation across galaxies. Ryan gave an exaggerated whistle, tilting his head to get a better look at the holographic image of the formidable figure. "Damn," he said again, this time a little louder. "The scary queen has a nice butt." He snickered softly, but sobered when he realized how inappropriate it was talking like that about such an intimidating leader. Then he smirked and whispered under his breath, "Bet no one's ever told her that to her face." Of course, everyone knew better than to even consider speaking in any tone other than reverence towards the Valorian queen. But Ryan wasn't known for playing by the rules. If there was a chance of some amusement, he continued muttering to himself while studying each angle and contour on the hologram, making exaggerated gestures as he spoke. "I'd let her conquer me any day." His voice got louder again when no one else could hear it anyway. And then his face froze in place for just an instant before breaking into a crooked grin. "Wait," Ryan thought suddenly, his eyes widening comically behind the thick lenses of his vis. Or did I say that out loud? The sudden realization made him jump, but even as he scanned around nervously to see if anyone else had heard, he couldn't resist chuckling at himself. Behind where Ryan stood, a soft shimmering flickered in what should have been empty space. The statue that Ryan thought was just part of the decoration, a sleek silver and purple figure frozen mid-step, began to shift subtly as the cloak technology powering it started to malfunction ever so slightly. The statue blinked slowly and turned its head toward Private Cooper, an expression of disbelief etched across her features under the metallic sheen. For a moment, Queen Valara felt like someone had flipped open all sorts of new switches in her brain, warmth of surprise radiating through her body for the first time ever. "Wait, did you say that out loud?" Ryan's voice was muffled as he spun around to face the statue. His eyes widened when they met what looked like a shifting hologram, then more so when it began to flicker again. Oh no, the cloak couldn't keep up with her astonishment and started breaking down faster now, revealing an unmistakably Valorian form behind Ryan. She was towering over him even while cloaked, but the malfunction of her technology made this moment particularly awkward. A gasp escaped from somewhere in his throat as he stared straight at a very real and very tall warrior queen who had somehow become uncloaked right there on guard duty with no explanation or warning whatsoever. "Ryan Cooper," she growled out finally, after what felt like an eternity of silence, her voice deep but controlled. "This is not the reaction I expected from my first visit to Earth." He swallowed hard as his mind raced wildly for some form of diplomatic response that wouldn't result in immediate imprisonment or worse, simultaneously considering whether he could outrun a Valorian queen who had him dead to rights. "Hi," was all Ryan managed, still staring at her wide-eyed. He thought back to the hologram and his own words moments earlier, "I'd let her conquer me any day." The silence between them stretched out as Queen Valara processed this unprecedented scenario with a mix of surprise and something else entirely, something she couldn't quite name, but felt like it might be amusement. "Your uniform, did I soil it?" Ryan whispered to himself in horror, looking down at his pants. The tension broke the dam inside him when he realized what had happened. Had made inappropriate jokes about her butt while talking out loud, and now there was an uncloaked warrior queen glaring right back at him with a mixture of shock and confusion. Her eyes flickered uncertainly as she considered just how strange this situation really was. She could feel the urge to laugh bubbling up inside her, something that had never happened before in all her years ruling Valar. And why? There stood Private Ryan Cooper, looking more nervous than terrified, and perhaps a little relieved. It wasn't often anyone treated her with such unfiltered honesty. "I may have soiled my uniform," he admitted finally, turning fully to face the towering figure of Queen Valara. Her eyes softened ever so slightly as she realized how this must look from his perspective. Her imposing size and reputation likely leading him straight into a panic attack over being caught inappropriately admiring her physique. "Well?" she demanded again, voice still stern, but with an edge that hinted at some form of curiosity. "What now?" Ryan's mouth went dry as he searched for words. "I am sorry," he stammered out finally. "It's just, no one ever treats you like a normal person." She stared at him long and hard. The first time in many years she allowed herself to consider what it might be like if someone did treat her normally, without fear or reverence. "I would appreciate some explanation for your behavior," Valara said finally. "This is unprecedented." Ryan nodded, trying his best to calm down but finding himself still slightly shaking from adrenaline and shock. I was just bored," he admitted sheepishly. "And you're so serious all the time." It felt like something funny had been overdue for a while now. The corners of Valara's lips twitched ever so slightly, a reaction she hadn't experienced before with anyone but herself in private reflection. Ryan took that slight upward curve as permission to continue, feeling braver by the second. "I mean, if you think about it, everyone's scared of you because they don't know what else to do or say. But I figured there must be something behind all that sternness." She watched him closely, her muscles tensing and relaxing with each word spoken, as though she were trying hard not to laugh out loud despite herself. "Maybe," Ryan ventured cautiously, "maybe it's okay just once in a while for someone to treat you like they would any other person." There was another long silence before Valara spoke again. "And how do I react then?" Ryan gulped audibly, but met her gaze squarely this time around. He shrugged nonchalantly, even though inside he felt as if his heart might just stop beating altogether. "Well," he said slowly, trying to sound casual despite the chaos swirling in his head, "if you laughed, that would be pretty unprecedented too." The air seemed to crackle between them for a moment before Queen Valara broke eye contact first and turned away ever so slightly. Ryan watched her back go rigid then relax again as she absorbed this new information. The cloak flickered one last time before fully disappearing, leaving no trace behind except what had just transpired, and the fact that Ryan Cooper was now standing face to face with a ruler who might actually be capable of something resembling amusement. He stood there in shock while Queen Valara turned completely around and faced him once more. This time her eyes met his, without the shield of metal or pretense. They were filled with an emotion he'd never seen reflected back at him before, an honest-to-goodness laugh threatening to bubble over any second now, if she could just get it under control. "Now," she said firmly, "we proceed from here." Ryan's heart raced as everything went silent around them again. The moment stretched out agonizingly long until finally, The corners of Valera's lips turned upward ever so slightly into something that looked suspiciously like a grin. And for just one brief instant in time and space, a soldier whose duty was to guard Earth, and an alien queen who had never laughed before Earthworld, tilted on its axis, because someone dared defy expectations with humor and honesty. Ryan blinked several times rapidly, as if trying to wake up from some strange dream. But there it stood clear as day. Queen Valara the Stern was staring back at him with something resembling amusement in her eyes for possibly the first time ever. She hadn't laughed yet, but then again, maybe he had just given everyone permission to try something new today. Now, he echoed softly beside her, words echoing in his head now, like a mantra. Now what? And so began an uncharted journey of two unlikely beings discovering shared humanity through moments previously thought impossible. Private Ryan Cooper's heart thudded against his ribcage, like a trapped bird desperate to escape its cage, as he was led through the towering, cold hallways of the alien embassy. His initial relief at Queen Valara's absence had been short-lived when he noticed the guards' stern faces and the silence that seemed to vibrate with tension. Ryan Cooper, the lead guard, repeated for what felt like the 100th time since being summoned from his post outside her quarters. "The Queen wants you in her throne room now." He swallowed hard, but forced himself not to look back at where he thought Valara might be watching him. Instead, Ryan kept walking, trying to steady his breathing and focus on anything to distract himself from the impending doom. The chamber was as imposing as ever, marble columns reaching towards a ceiling that seemed to hold infinity itself, aloft gold inlaid patterns etched into walls of polished obsidian, an immense dais at its center topped with a high-backed throne where Valara would sit, her imposing figure silhouetted against the light streaming through stained glass windows depicting celestial scenes. Advisors and guards stood lined up on either side, as if waiting for some grand announcement or execution. The tension was palpable in every breath they took, and Ryan knew it was because of him. He had inadvertently crossed a line, but whether that meant death or merely the end of his career, he wasn't sure which would be worse. "Everyone out." Valara's voice cut through like ice, and her advisors began to file out without question, their faces grave, as they left the soldier standing there alone with only the Queen herself for company now. Ryan's mind raced back to that moment when everything changed, a joke made in jest about a statue come alive due to his own boredom-fueled imagination, and how it could have ended so differently if he hadn't spoken up. She stepped closer, her imposing figure making him feel small and insignificant despite their height difference being minimal. "You said my posterior," she began slowly, each word deliberate as though measuring its weight against the silence between them. Ryan's mouth went dry, but somehow managed to find his voice again when it mattered most. "I was delirious, ma'am," he stammered out before adding hastily for clarification, "heat stroke from solar radiation. Definitely not thinking clearly." Valara's eyes narrowed ever so slightly as she took another step forward until they were mere feet apart, close enough that Ryan could see the faintest hint of something shifting within her gaze, but couldn't quite place what it was. "And that you would allow me to conquer you?" Her tone wasn't accusatory, rather, there was an undercurrent he didn't fully understand. He shook visibly now, every muscle tense and ready for impact, yet unable to break eye contact with this figure who held more power over him than anyone else ever had. "Just words," Ryan offered weakly as a defense mechanism before adding hurriedly in case it wasn't enough explanation, "meaningless words. Please don't kill me." Still no reaction, except the briefest of pauses where she considered his plea then looked past him out towards nothing specific before turning back fully to face him once more. "Say something else," Valara commanded finally, after what felt like an eternity had passed in just those few moments alone together under her intense scrutiny. Ryan blinked, surprised by both this unexpected request and the challenge it seemed to hold. "What?" She tilted her head slightly, as if considering how best to phrase whatever she intended next without giving too much away, but also making him realize there was far more complexity beneath that stern exterior than had ever imagined possible when first posted here months ago. "Something no one else would dare say," Valara reiterated firmly, each word emphasizing the gravity of her request, yet somehow still allowing room for something unexpected, perhaps even hope. Photo happened between them in defiance of typical social norms and expectations on both sides. Ryan gulped audibly, again, but forced himself not to flinch under her unwavering gaze. Instead, he squared his shoulders slightly, as if bracing against an unseen force before venturing hesitantly, "I mean, everyone's scared of you because they don't know what else to do or say." Valara watched him closely now without any hint at all of the tension that had been present earlier with her advisors outside this chamber. Her muscles tensed and relaxed subtly, as though she were trying hard not to laugh out loud despite herself. "Maybe," Ryan continued cautiously, "maybe it's okay just once in a while for someone to treat you like they would any other person." There was another long silence before Valara spoke again. Her eyes searched his face, deeply searching for something he couldn't identify yet dared hope she might find there instead of fear or respect alone. "Then how do I react?" she asked finally, voice softer now, but still commanding attention. Ryan gulped audibly once more, as if preparing himself mentally before meeting her gaze squarely this time around, despite knowing full well the consequences should he fail utterly here today. Amidst all these unknowns, he shrugged nonchalantly, even though inside his heart felt like it might just stop beating altogether any second now under pressure from everything spiraling out of control. "Well," Ryan said slowly, trying to sound casual despite feeling completely off balance and unsure where this conversation was leading them both in reality. "If you laugh." The air seemed to crackle between them for a moment before Queen Valara broke eye contact, first turning slightly away, as though needing space just long enough to process these new revelations about herself she hadn't even known existed until now, being presented by such an unlikely source. Ryan watched her back go rigid, then relax again, as if absorbing this radical concept of laughter perhaps making sense in certain circumstances beyond what had ever been considered acceptable protocol before today. The cloak flickered one last time, hinting at its earlier presence during observations that no longer mattered compared to the present reality unfolding between them right now. "Now," she said firmly, turning fully back towards him again, "finally we proceed from here." Ryan blinked several times rapidly, as if trying desperately just then to wake up from some strange dream. But there stood clear before his eyes a ruler who hadn't laughed before, but perhaps might actually be capable of something resembling amusement thanks to this one-off interaction that defied all expectations set forth previously regarding their relative positions and roles within the greater scheme of things. Queen Valara stared back at him with an honest-to-goodness laugh, threatening indeed to bubble over any second now if she could just get it under control. For Ryan Cooper, soldier whose duty was merely guarding Earth's interests abroad against such a formidable presence, suddenly found himself on equal footing in terms they both understood implicitly despite the vast cultural differences separating their lives previously. "Now," he echoed softly beside her words, still echoing loudly within his head now, like some kind of mantra. Now what? And so began an uncharted journey, indeed, for two unlikely beings, discovering shared humanity through moments thought impossible prior to today's events, that had unfolded unexpectedly yet profoundly altering the course ahead, inevitably moving forward together rather than apart henceforth. Private Ryan Cooper stood rooted to his spot, a mix of confusion and terror coursing through him as he stared back at Queen Valara, the very image that had become an object of amusement for his idle mind during boring guard duty, only to realize she wasn't an immobile statue anymore, but was standing right there in front of him. His heart pounded against his ribcage, a cacophony of fear and bewilderment echoing through every nerve ending. "Okay," he finally managed to say, trying desperately not to sound as shaken as he felt inside. "Why aren't I dead?" Queen Valara's piercing gaze softened slightly at this question, her golden eyes shifting from their usual frosty blue tint towards something more human and relatable beneath the surface. Her voice, when it came, was a low rumble that reverberated through the room like thunder after sunset. "For 50 years, she began slowly, each word carrying with it an unspoken weight of history and power. "Everyone has feared me, advisors, subjects, enemies alike. I am the Stern." Ryan swallowed hard, but tried to keep his expression neutral, noting how her shoulders seemed a bit less rigid than before when he had been observing the image from afar. "I haven't laughed since I was a child," she continued almost as an aside, looking at him with something that felt like desperation now rather than unyielding sternness. "You looked at my image and made jokes, ridiculous ones, about how I look in promotional images." She paused here, her silver hair cascading down over one shoulder as if by mere chance, or perhaps a subconscious act of showing vulnerability for the first time. "And you weren't afraid, you were amused," she added quietly, after another beat of silence. Her lips formed these words carefully but clearly, almost like they stung on her tongue from years of not speaking them aloud. Queen Valara's fingers clenched and unclenched beside her body, a subtle sign perhaps that there was more to this intimidating figure than met the eye at first glance. She pointed towards a window behind Ryan where sunlight filtered through leaves in what appeared to be an outdoor garden area beyond. "Walk with me," she said softly, almost as if asking him instead of commanding it outright now for possibly the first time ever from her lips in public view. "Talk to me the way you talked when you thought no one could hear." Ryan felt a shiver run down his spine at these words, but also caught something different, something akin to loneliness shining through briefly before she hid it once again behind those fierce golden eyes. The idea of being alone and unlaughed at for so long made him feel inexplicably compelled, despite the danger involved. He took another deep breath, willing himself not to trip over his own feet as he stepped forward towards her. "Okay," he said with a nod before adding jokingly, "but if I die, I'm blaming you. Your scariness." Her lips twitched ever so slightly at this comment, almost like the ghost of what might have been called a smile under different circumstances. In the quiet corridor leading out to the garden, both kept their gazes downcast. Initially, before they emerged into full sunlight, where blooming flowers and rustling leaves provided natural privacy amidst alien flora that Ryan found fascinating in its strangeness, yet beautiful. He glanced nervously over his shoulder several times as he walked beside Queen Valara, feeling her imposing presence even when she said nothing more. As they moved further out away from prying eyes inside the palace grounds, which were indeed guarded heavily but seemed to give them space here, Ryan started talking again, this time without any filter whatsoever, just like before. "So how's it going there on Valoria?" Queen Valara blinked at him sharply for a moment, then gave an almost imperceptible shrug in response, as if she didn't really have much interest or expectation of answers to such superficial questions. But Ryan kept right on going, babbling about Earth news and random musings, without even knowing why he felt compelled suddenly now to share all these things with her, despite how outlandish they must sound given their context. His voice carried a natural rhythm that belied years spent talking himself down from the edges of despair back home whenever his life seemed too mundane or lonely for comfort. "I mean," Ryan continued after another moment's pause, "you probably don't even care about Earth stuff at all, huh? But hey look, there's like this new sports ball team coming up on my planet soon, and I was wondering if maybe you might get into it." Queen Valara actually stopped mid-step, then turned sharply towards him, with a rare expression of true surprise crossing her stern features. "Sports ball?" she repeated, voice tinged unexpectedly with curiosity. Ryan couldn't help but smile at this reaction despite everything else going on around them. He nodded eagerly, as if explaining something both simple and complex simultaneously. "Yeah, it's like basketball meets rugby on roller skates sometimes." Her eyebrows rose slightly in what could only be described now as fascination mixed with disbelief before she finally began moving again, leading him towards a more secluded part of the garden under ancient-looking trees that hummed softly against their surroundings. "Tell me more," Valara said after a moment, her voice softer than it had been all day long. It wasn't just about control anymore. There was genuine interest shining through in ways he hadn't anticipated even existing before today's unlikely encounter began changing perspectives around them rapidly yet quietly, so far from prying eyes. Ryan complied easily enough, then launching into increasingly outrageous descriptions of various Earth sports and games, all the while trying his best not to offend or overwhelm their unusual conversation partner with too much information at once. He found himself laughing more freely now, despite the inherent danger involved in such a scenario, as he recounted stories from back home that she probably would never have heard anywhere else. It was during one particularly absurd tale about a local festival involving giant mechanical robots built and operated by teams of people for competitive battles, a spectacle which Ryan said made him feel like a kid again with wonder, where something clicked between them. Valara's face contorted briefly into what could only be called mirth as she processed the sheer ridiculousness yet endearing innocence behind such human customs described in detail. "Did you really build these things just for fun?" she asked, her voice still soft, but now carrying a hint of true wonder along with a new emotion completely alien to Ryan until this point, who knew only fear or respect when interacting with their royal Valorian hostess previously. He nodded earnestly, even as his laughter echoed around them. "Absolutely. And us sometimes we fight over ridiculous things too, like which robot is the best looking or coolest sounding." Valara's lips twitched again, almost involuntarily this time, before she finally allowed herself a small chuckle, a sound so foreign in these chambers that it startled even him, hearing it for real rather than just imagining such a possibility. Guards patrolling nearby nearly fainted upon hearing their queen actually laugh out loud amidst the usual tense atmosphere pervading through all diplomatic enclaves on both planets involved in this summit. But Ryan simply kept smiling as he watched her relax further into conversation, feeling an odd kind of kinship forming between them despite everything that separated who they were and where they came from. The guards heard it, and nearly fainted. And the banquet hall was aglow with an eerie silence that hung heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the earlier lively chatter and clinking of silverware as diplomats from both Earth and Valar met for diplomatic discussions crucial to their future alliances. Suddenly, General Crex's face darkened under his battle helmet's visor, the deep shadows masking not just his features, but also his intentions. "You said that about my boo." Valara had laughed earlier in response to Ryan's teasing remarks based on promotional images from Earth, something no one at this summit expected to hear. The moment was fleeting, and yet it lingered now like a whisper of rebellion against the oppressive formality of their interactions, sparking something dangerous within Crex. As soon as her laughter faded into whispers between guards exchanging looks behind closed doors, General Crex signaled his personal aide with an imperious gesture. "Prepare my weapon," he snarled through clenched teeth, eyes narrowing to slits, as if focusing on the very idea of Valera's sudden break from tradition could mean war itself. Few minutes later, under cover of darkness and quiet conversations that masked suspicion, Crex made his move. He drew a concealed blade, a jagged piece of metal designed for assassination rather than combat, slipping it silently through the folds of ceremonial robes meant to symbolize peace instead of might. His target, Queen Valara herself. She was seated at her designated table in full regalia, but with an air of surprising serenity, almost as if she sensed nothing wrong despite all signs pointing towards impending doom. Yet when Crex lunged forward from behind a tapestry concealing him perfectly against the backdrop's shadows, it wasn't fear that gripped Valara, rather, it was shock tinged by disbelief. In less than an instant, her reflexes kicked in with deadly precision honed over centuries of war and conflict. With practiced ease, she twisted sharply away from Crex's initial strike aimed straight for her heart, and then countered with a swift kick that sent him stumbling back into the crowd gathering around their tables. But he was far too quick to be caught so easily. His follow-up attack came almost immediately, as if there were no time for hesitation or remorse. Valera's face contorted from shock to fierce determination, muscles bunching beneath her armor, even before she moved again, this time blocking with a metal arm piece designed specifically for such occasions. A metallic clash resounded through the hall where moments ago only quiet whispers had filled the space between delegates and dignitaries gathered in solemn expectation of peace. Ryan Cooper watched. Ryan, General Crux Valara, Ryan Crux Valara, Ryan Crux, General Crux, Ryan Crux, Ryan Valar, Ryan, General Crux Valar, Valara, Valara, Ryan, Valara, Ryan, Valara, Ryan. Andy Ryan woke up to a sterile, pale ceiling and the beeping of medical machinery. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and metal, but what startled him was seeing someone sitting beside his bedevilorian. He blinked hard as he tried to focus, squinting against the lights until they adjusted. There she sat, unmistakably Queen Valara, though without her usual intimidating armor, and with her hair loose around her shoulders. She wore simple clothes that did little to hide her towering presence. "Wait a minute," Ryan said aloud, his voice raspy from disuse and injury. "Queen Valara?" He shifted uncomfortably on the bed, wincing as pain shot through him at even minor movements. Her gaze met his without flinching. She had been there for hours, watching over him in silence. "You almost died," she said quietly, after a moment of tense stillness between them. Ryan shrugged or tried Totho. It only made the throbbing in his chest more intense. "I've done stupider things," he mumbled, trying not to show how much that simple movement hurt. "You're the first queen who laughed at my jokes." His eyes flickered down and back up again, as if gauging her reaction. Valera's face remained a mask of stern reserve until now. When she spoke next, there was an edge in her voice he hadn't heard before, not anger or coldness, but something else entirely. "No one has ever protected me just because they wanted to," Valera said softly, almost wistfully. "It's always been duty, obligation, politics." Ryan looked at her, then really looked past the imposing figure and into the woman beneath it. Alan saw not a fearsome queen, but someone who was truly alone, despite her, perhaps even because of power she wielded. "A lonely old bat," he joked with his trademark crooked smile as pain allowed. "Well, I've got news for you. Someone should look out for their queen every now and then." His voice softened slightly when he added the next part. "You've got a great butt and a terrible sense of humor." For several heartbeats, nothing happened. Then Valera did something unexpected. She laughed again. Her laughter was both joyous and sad at once. It broke through years of icy composure, like water cracking ice in springtime. And this time, she cried to a single tear tracked down her cheek as she looked back into Ryan's eyes with an open vulnerability that made his heart ache for reasons he couldn't fully understand. "That was unexpected," Valera said after a moment, wiping away the stray moisture under her eye before it could spread any further. Yan chuckled softly. "Despite everything." "Yeah, well, you can call me unpredictable." She smiled faintly then, something akin to gratitude in her gaze, as she stood up slowly from where she'd been sitting by his bedside. As much as Ryan wanted to protest, being left alone now that the immediate danger had passed, there was a part of him that understood Valera needed time to process this sudden shift just as much, if not more, than he did. "You rest," Valera said finally, before turning and leaving without another word, her long strides carrying her swiftly out of Ryan's line of sight. But for the first time since they'd met under such fraught circumstances, there was a sense of warmth between them, of shared understanding that neither would ever fully acknowledge, but both felt deeply nonetheless. As he drifted back into sleep with thoughts full of laughter and tears alike lingering in his mind, Ryan wondered if their encounter had changed not just Valera's perception of him but her entire outlook on life, and maybe, even more importantly for himself, whether it might have altered the way she saw herself as well. Queen Valara stood at the grand departure ceremony, her armor gleaming in the stark sunlight of the summit's main hall. She glanced around, noting the rigid postures and formal expressions of those assembled diplomats from various planets, military leaders, and a handful of humans like Private Ryan Cooper, who had been guarding her secret observer earlier that day. The atmosphere was tense with protocol and formality as the final speeches were given by high-ranking officials. Each word spoken echoed through the hall, but none resonated quite so deeply in Valera's ears as they fell upon deaf ones. She knew what she needed to do. However, she had a duty to her people and her world. As Ryan Cooper stood alone at his post near the exit door, he noticed movement out of the corner of his eye. It was Queen Valara, flanked by advisors who were delivering formal farewells with stiff bows and hushed voices. The queen's posture was straight as ever, but there was something different about her today, a softness that shone through despite her stern demeanor. Ryan felt a knot form in his stomach. He knew she had to leave soon, and the thought of never seeing those piercing golden eyes again filled him with an unexpected sadness. Yet here they were, at the ceremonial conclusion, where everything would go back to normal, and perhaps even worse than before if any word got out about their brief exchange. As Valera's advisors stepped aside for her final moment alone on Earth's soil, Ryan braced himself mentally. He had no idea how she was going to react, but hoped that maybe just once more could make her smile again. Valara approached him slowly, stopping just a few feet away from where he stood guard. Her face was calm and unreadable as always, yet there seemed something different now. It took all of Ryan's nerve not to flinch under the intensity of her gaze. "Humanity is known for many things," Valara said quietly but clearly enough that only Ryan could hear above the murmurs from the crowd behind them. "But I will remember one in particular, a soldier who made me laugh, and then bled to protect that laughter." Ryan's breath caught in his throat. He had no idea what to say or how he should respond. Shouldn't this be some kind of punishment for insubordination? Yet here was the sternest queen in existence speaking with such genuine warmth. "Is there anything I can do, Mom?" Ryan asked hesitantly, before realizing she would never expect him to say those words. But it felt right somehow. He had saved her life, after all, and now perhaps this could be his chance to repay that debt differently. Valara looked down at him, then really saw him for the first time since their secret encounter, and there was a softness in her eyes he hadn't seen before, one born out of mutual respect rather than fear or duty. She reached up with shaking hands and tugged off one gauntlet, revealing pale flesh underneath. "Take my hand," she whispered, extending it to him despite protocol demanding they maintain distance until the very last second when formalities allowed such contact. Ryan stared at her for a moment in shock before reaching out slowly, taking hold of that cool metal grip with his own sweating palm. It felt like an electric current ran through them both. And then she spoke again, voice low and earnest. "I will return in 6 months for another summit," Valara promised solemnly, yet not without promise now. There was a lightness there he hadn't expected, but welcomed all the same. "Expect more inappropriate comments about my posterior from you." Ryan blinked several times, trying to process what she meant by that statement. Was this some kind of weird compliment, or perhaps just her way of acknowledging their bond in a unique manner? Before Ryan could ask further questions, Valara released his hand and stepped back into herself completely. She turned away then without another word, but not before glancing one last time over shoulder at him standing there stunned. Ryan watched as she walked toward her ship amidst the crowd that parted to let them pass. His commanding officer stood staring dumbfoundedly nearby while soldiers milled about uncertainly, wondering if their private had gone mad speaking directly with royalty. "Cooper, did the Valorian Queen just?" his superior asked slowly, after a long pause full of unvoiced questions. Ryan grinned widely despite everything still swirling around inside him. "I have no idea, sir," he admitted honestly, even though deep down part of him knew exactly what had transpired between them tonight during their secret meetings and open exchanges alike. "But I should probably work on my material." The words floated into the air like a joke told in silence, amidst laughter unheard, but felt nonetheless. 6 months passed much too quickly for Ryan's liking. Days blurred together under dull monotony of routine duties, while nights were filled with restless dreams about silver-haired queens and impromptu laughs caught behind cloaking shields during secret rendezvous no one else could ever know existed or understand, if told aloud, even by him now, when reality hit differently yet somehow still strangely familiar somehow too. Then finally came the day it happened again. Queen Valara arrived back at Earth for another summit, this time with an entourage of diplomats and guards as usual. Only this time there was also something else, something intangible but undeniable in how she moved through crowds or locked eyes briefly across rooms where before all such contact had been stiffly formal, yet now held hints of warmth only visible to those who knew what they were looking for between lines left unsaid. And once more, when it came time for official departure ceremonies later that evening, Ryan found himself standing guard duty near the exit. He couldn't help but glance over shoulder often throughout event's duration, half expecting her arrival yet fully prepared should he catch glimpse of familiar purple skin amidst thronging diplomats and protocol officers alike. When she did appear at last among crowd gathering around stage for closing remarks by various planetary delegates, clothing identical to previous visit, though expression softer, somehow felt a flutter in chest he couldn't quite explain away as simple butterflies from adrenaline alone anymore. It was something deeper, more significant than mere nervousness before high-ranking official. As final speeches ended, an assembly began breaking up towards exits leading off-site, where waiting transport ships awaited each delegation's departure back home across galaxies. Vast expanses once more separated them until next scheduled gathering. Months downline timeline allowed such gatherings according strict diplomatic schedule. None could afford skipping without severe repercussions potentially incurred thereby for nations involved within interstellar politics overall. Yet here stood Ryan watching her approach calmly amidst flurry activities surrounding them both, even as he prepared internally how best address situation now, knowing full well outcome wouldn't follow standard protocol anymore. He braced himself mentally, readying words that would hopefully bridge gap between duty and genuine connection forged under cover of night, but felt true no matter time or place. "Good evening," Valara greeted simply enough when she reached him finally, just few feet away near door exit point, where guard duties required station presence, currently held by private human soldier guarding alien queen from distant worlds far beyond familiar home planets. Borders now extended across cosmos through interconnected systems of alliances and treaties, keeping peace amidst diversity spanning starlight's reach. "Mom," Ryan replied respectfully, yet not without hint of warmth, and greeting conveyed back likewise. "It's good to see you again." Valara nodded ever so slightly, but with clear acknowledgement held between them, even as protocols demanded remaining outwardly formal here among others still present who might overhear their conversation, thus far maintained under cloak invisible Barry, or during brief encounter last visit, yet now required breaking such secrecy temporarily, if not completely. "Your comments about posterity were noted," she said plainly enough, without teasing edge Ryan had expected, but appreciated nonetheless given her typical stern nature, rarely showing signs of lightheartedness before recent encounters altered dynamics between them both. Ryan chuckled softly. Despite everything surrounding situation still felt weighty with importance, yet also strangely light somehow too. "I'll have to work on my material," he admitted honestly enough, without hinting towards deeper understanding now shared mutually across species boundaries, once thought insurmountable but proved otherwise through simple act of laughter found unexpectedly amidst crisis moment, followed by unexpected bond forged. You enter cover darkness where none could see nor judge, but mattered all the same. Valara smiled faintly then, something akin to genuine warmth, an expression that made Ryan's heart clench for reasons he couldn't fully understand yet felt deeply nonetheless. "Indeed," she agreed quietly, before turning away towards a waiting transport ship waiting patiently beyond crowd's immediate vicinity, where official departure could proceed without further delay according strict diplomatic protocols necessary. Maintaining order amidst complexity interstellar politics required navigating successfully despite inherent challenges involved. "Good luck with your duties, Mom," Ryan called after her retreating figure, knowing full well message carried deeper significance far beyond surface level words spoken here. Amongst others, gathered for ceremonial purposes alone. Valara paused briefly then, before turning back one last time, to glance over shoulder towards where he stood watching. There was an unspoken understanding passing between them both, something neither would ever fully articulate out loud, but felt deeply nonetheless within hearts and souls connected through shared experience transcending typical boundaries usually separating such vastly different individuals from divergent worlds. And with that final look exchanged, Queen Valara stepped into a waiting vessel whereupon engines ignited softly amidst surrounding silence, then roar of launch sequence initiating before finally she was gone beyond visible horizon, carrying hope along too for future encounters, perhaps less bound by standard protocols, yet somehow no less significant or meaningful despite constraints imposed universally across galaxies spanning starlight's reach. Back on Earth, weeks after her departure and many formal meetings later, involving official liaisons dedicated specific roles, assigned handling diplomatic relations, including humorous exchanges noted between Ryan Cooper and Queen Valara during last visit, which prompted creation unique position designated official liaison for Valorian human-humor relations. This unprecedented move by Queen herself recognized value found within unexpected moments, shared unexpectedly despite vast differences separating their worlds. Ryan stood at his new desk filled with documents detailing interstellar humor theories, cultural references spanning multiple planets, comedic histories, all aimed towards fostering better mutual understanding through laughter rather than war or negotiation alone. He chuckled to himself, reading over notes regarding specific jokes noted effective in eliciting smiles from stern Valorian Queen, proving once more that despite distance and differences, shared humanity's sense of humor could bridge even most challenging divides. As he prepared for next scheduled visit by Queen Valara to arrive soon via interstellar flight paths mapping complex networks connecting Earth with distant planets across galaxy, Ryan felt a strange mix of emotions, nervousness about upcoming meeting, yet also excitement knowing opportunity existed once more to connect beyond typical formalities through shared laughter found unexpectedly amidst crisis moment, followed by an unexpected bond forged under cover darkness. And so began new chapter in both their lives, a journey towards better understanding and deeper connections built not just upon duty or obligation, but genuine respect born from mutual appreciation for simple joy of humor transcending boundaries usually thought insurmountable, yet proven otherwise through acts small though significant enough to change everything. And every time she visits, the stern queen who never smiled becomes, for a few hours, simply Valarash, laughs at bad jokes and has great but according one human brave enough tell her. N.